The wind howled like 1,000 tortured souls across the frozen wasteland. Ice cracked and splintered beneath heavy boots. Soldiers moved in ragged formation, each step a battle against temperatures that felt impossible to survive. Their breath hung in crystalline clouds, freezing almost instantly in the brutal Arctic air. Somewhere in the white darkness, death waited, silently, patiently. This was the Wolf River Crossing, January 1942, a military operation so dangerous that survival seemed more like a cruel joke than a possibility. The Canadian soldiers of the 1st Special Service Force knew they were walking into something unprecedented, an impossible mission through terrain that seemed designed to kill them. The Alaskan wilderness stretched before them, a blank, merciless canvas of white and gray, where temperatures could drop to 40 below zero and wind could strip flesh from bone in minutes. Their mission was simple, but nothing about simple missions is ever truly simple. The United States and Canada needed to establish a critical supply route through Alaska. The Japanese had already invaded the Aleutian Islands. Military strategists understood that controlling transportation routes could mean the difference between victory and total defeat. And these men, tough, trained, but ultimately human, were the ones who would make that happen. In the bitter cold of a January morning, they would attempt something that seemed mathematically impossible, crossing a frozen river with heavy equipment, vehicles and supplies. No one had ever successfully done this before, not in these conditions, not with these stakes. Private James Mackenzie clutched his rifle. His hands were already numb inside thick gloves. The sound of ice cracking beneath military trucks created a symphony of potential disaster. One wrong move, one unexpected shift in the landscape, and everything could be lost. The temperature was negative 45 degrees. At this point, cold stopped being something you felt and became something that invaded you, that possessed you, that wanted to consume you entirely. Their commander, Major Leonard Tremblay, knew the risks. Intelligence reports suggested the river ice was barely 8 inches thick in most places. Military vehicles weighed thousands of pounds. Standard ice needed at least 12 inches to support such weight. They were operating in a realm between mathematical probability and sheer madness. Keep moving. Tremblay's ice cut through the wind. Stay tight. Stay focused. But focus was becoming difficult. The cold wasn't just a physical challenge. It was psychological warfare. Some of the men had already started experiencing the first stages of hypothermia. Their minds were becoming foggy, reflexes slowing, decision-making becoming increasingly difficult. The human body wasn't designed for these extremes. A military transport truck suddenly lurched. The ice beneath it made a sound like a massive tree splitting. Everyone froze. In that moment, survival hung by the thinnest possible thread. The story of the 1942 ice crossing wasn't just about a military mission. It was about human beings pushed beyond every conceivable limit, about what happens when technology, strategy, and raw human endurance collide in the most unforgiving environment imaginable. And it was about to get much, much worse. Would they make it across, or would the ice in the merciless Alaskan wilderness claim them all? The first trucks began to move again, slowly, carefully, each rotation of their massive wheels a potential death sentence. Private Mackenzie held his breath, watching the truck's wheels sink fractionally with each revolution. The ice groaned like a wounded animal, a low, terrifying sound that seemed to promise imminent collapse. Major Tremblay's ice crackled over the radio, measured but tense. Delta Team, report status. Static. Then a weak response. Sir, we're losing hydraulic pressure in the third transport. Transmissions struggling in this cold. Another truck's engine coughed, sputtered, then roared back to life. The mechanical sounds seemed almost human, desperate, fighting for survival against impossible conditions. Private Thomas Rodriguez, seated in the second truck's passenger seat, watched condensation form on the inside of the windshield. His gers traced intricate patterns in the fog. A nervous habit from childhood. His grandfather had fought in World War I, told stories of impossible missions. But this Mayberg, this was something else entirely. The landscape was a monochromatic nightmare. Endless white, init gray, no horizon line where sky met earth, just an unbroken expanse of potential death. Geological surveys had warned them. The river's ice was unpredictable. Underwater currents created weak spots. Thermal variations could compromise structural integrity in seconds. Each vehicle carried not just men but critical supplies for the Alaskan defensive line. If they failed, the entire western coastal strategy would collapse. Sergeant Elena Karov, the unit's most experienced cold weather specialist, watched the terrain through high-powered binoculars. Her breath created tiny frost clouds with each exhale. She'd trained in Siberian military camps. She understood cold in a way most Americans couldn't comprehend. Movement ahead, she reported suddenly. Possible terrain shift at kilometer marker 7. Tremblay acknowledged with a sharp, economical hand gesture. Every movement was calculated. Every decision could mean survival or catastrophe. The trucks moved in tight formation, 12 vehicles, 47 men, tons of equipment, munitions, communication gear, portable generators, emergency medical supplies. Each truck's weight distributed carefully, drivers instructed to maintain precise speeds. No sudden movements, no unnecessary vibrations. Rodriguez remembered his training. Weight distribution, slow steady momentum, treat the ice like a living entity. Rough-decked it, but don't fear it. Easier said than done. A distant crack split the air. Not from the ice. Something else. Possible artillery. Rodriguez whispered to Mackenzie. Mackenzie shook his head. Too far. Probably just ice shifting. But in war probably was a dangerous word. The first signs of trouble came subtly. A slight vibration. Almost imperceptible, but trained soldiers feel such things differently. Tremblay noticed it first. A microscopic change in terrain texture. The way light reflected off the snow. Something was different. All units, he radioed. Prepare for potential terrain adjustment. Reduce speed by 20%. The trucks complied. Massive wheels turning with mechanical precision. But precision meant nothing against nature's random brutality. The ice wasn't just a surface. It was a living, breathing entity with its own rules, its own terrible logic, and they were about to learn those rules the hard way. Suddenly everything changed. A massive section of ice began to fracture. Tremblay's ice cut through the radio. Evasive maneuvers. Now, but in the Arctic now could be too late. The mission to cross the frozen river had just become a fight for pure survival. Would they make it across? Or would the ice claim them all? The ice shattered like glass, a spider web of fractures racing outward from the initial break. Rodriguez felt the first lurching drop, a stomach-churning moment when physics became unpredictable. Hard right. Tremblay's ice cut through the radio static. Mackenzie's hands were already moving, spinning the wheel with practiced precision. The massive truck's weight became both enemy and ally mices too heavy to dance across the failing surface. Yet momentum might be their only salvation. 2 trucks ahead. Elena Karov's vehicle began to tilt. Her training kicked in instantly. She keyed her radio, lateral stress increasing, northern quadrant showing complete structural failure. The ice wasn't just breaking, it was disintegrating. Massive chunks the size of city blocks began to separate, creating yawning chasms between vehicle columns. Rodriguez could see the blue-white darkness beneath near the hungry ID waiting to swallow them whole. Spread formation, Tremblay commanded. Do not cluster. Clustering meant certain death. If one truck went down, it would create a chain reaction that could pull entire sections of the convoy into the freezing abyss. Rodriguez felt sweat break across his forehead, despite the sub-zero temperature. Tactical training was one thing, surviving was something else entirely. The first truck disappeared. No dramatic explosion, no massive sound, just a sudden silent drop into darkness. One moment it was there. The next near's gone. Schmidt's unit. Someone screamed over the radio. Schmidt's unit is down. Elena's ice remained calm. Professional. Confirm vehicle status. Do not panic. But panic was a living thing now. It crawled through the convoy like a virus. Rodriguez watched Mackenzie's hands. They were steady. Military-trained muscle memory holding against pure animal terror. Each movement calculated. Each correction precise. The ice continued to break. More trucks vanished. Not falling, exactly. More like being swallowed. The surface tension gave way like tissue paper, revealing a liquid darkness that seemed alive, hungry. Tremblay's ice remained a constant, maintain radio discipline. Report status. Keep moving. 12 trucks had started this mission. Now barely 7 remained, each driver fighting against impossible physics, against a landscape that had become a living enemy. Rodriguez realized something fundamental in that moment. This wasn't just about crossing a river anymore. This was pure survival. The radio crackled. Static mixed with breathless reports. Fragments of information. Losing hydraulic pressure. Right side suspension compromised. Temperature readings destabilizing. Elena's ice cut through thermal gradients suggest underlying current movement. This isn't random ice break. Something's manipulating the surface. Mackenzie glanced at Rodriguez. A look that said more than words. Something else was happening here. The trucks that remained moved like wounded animals, limping, desperate. Each revolution of their massive wheels could be their last contact with solid ground. Rodriguez gripped his emergency release. Standard protocol. Be ready to bail. But in these conditions, bailing meant certain death. Freezing water would kill faster than any bullet. The mission parameters had changed. Survival was now the only objective, and the ice, that treacherous living surface, was just getting started. Rodriguez felt the first tremor before he heard it. A deep subsonic vibration that seemed to originate from beneath the ice itself. Elena's ice was clinical, seismic activity detected, non-standard frequency. The remaining trucks began to slide. Not fall, slide. As if something massive was moving underneath the frozen surface. Mackenzie's eyes narrowed. That's not natural. Tremblay's radio transmission became staccato. Converged defensive formation. But there was no defensive formation against what came next. The ice didn't break. It dissolved. Like liquid metal transforming, the surface became transparent, then translucent, then nothing. Trucks began to sink into a darkness that moved. Rodriguez saw tentacles first, not biological, not mechanical, something in between. Crystalline structures that pulsed with an inner luminescence reaching up from the depths, wrapping around vehicle chassis. Not engage. Tremblay screamed, but engagement was no longer a choice. The structures, part machine, part something else entirely, Massad began systematically dismantling the trucks, not destroying, extracting, as if studying each component, each human inside. Elena's ice remained calm, documenting encounter sequence. Rodriguez watched a tentacle pass through the reinforced metal of Mackenzie's truck like it was tissue paper. No heat, no friction, just separation. 2 trucks remained. Then one. The AL vehicle. Rodriguez's masses balanced on a razor's edge between solid and liquid, between known and unknown.
He
understood then. This wasn't a mission. This was a probe. Humanity was being examined, measured, categorized. The last thing Rodriguez saw was Elena's face, perfectly calm, recording, always recording. Then darkness. Complete, absolute. Silence replaced sound.
ice reformed.
Pristine, untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. Here's the completion of the script. Hours later, satellite imaging showed nothing. No disturbance, no trace. Weeks passed. Government agencies cycled through protocols, classified, redacted, buried, but something remained. A single recovered data chip, recovered from Rodriguez's vehicle, encrypted. Fragmented. Elena's UL transmission, compressed into microscopic data fragments, contained more than anyone realized. Encoded within were quantum resonance patterns, mathematical sequences that didn't match any known terrestrial or computational language. Something alien, something waiting. The chip sat in a sealed laboratory, untouched, watched, deep beneath Antarctic ice. Something shifted, waited, observed. Dr. Hannah Reese, lead researcher at DARPA's Advanced Systems Division, noticed the first anomaly 3 months after the expedition's disappearance. Microscopic fractal patterns emerging spontaneously on the chip's surface, growing, evolving, not damage. Communication. Her colleague Dr. Marcus Chen watched as the patterns formed complex geometries, mathematical languages that seem to breathe, pulse, live. It's not just data, Chen whispered. It's alive. Reese understood then. This wasn't technology. This was first contact, and humanity wasn't initiating. They were being invited. The ice would wait. The structures beneath would wait, patient, calculating, measuring humanity's readiness. One more probe, one more test. Somewhere in the vast whiteness of Antarctica, something ancient and patient continued its silent reconnaissance, waiting.